So, say you're sitting in class. It's not your favorite class. In fact, it's your least favorite class. The words least favorite, obviously, are the words you use when you're talking to your grandma about school and she asks you which classes you like and don't like. If you're talking to anyone but grandma, you'd say this class sucks. It sucks because you're not good at it. It's not just that you don't get it. You don't even get why you don't get it, or why it even matters that you get it or not. Some kids don't get algebra. Some kids don't get history. It varies, but whatever class it is for you, you're sitting there wondering why factoring polynomials or sentence diagramming the past, perfect, continuous tense, or World War -5 has anything to do with anything. During parent-teacher conferences, your teacher diplomatically told your parents that you don't have an affinity for the subject. Your parents miss his point. They think that a lack of affinity for a subject just means you have to work a tad bit harder to get that A+. They don't realize that a lack of affinity for something means that their darling child, the product of their combined genomes, is doomed to fail. Everyone else in this class, of course, is pretty much ripping their friggin' arms out of their sockets as they stretch their hands as high in the air as possible, hoping that this time the teacher will call on them to diagram a sentence or graph a function. Normally, you'd be slouching in your chair to the point where your head was basically where your butt should be, just to minimize the chance that, despite the tropical rainforest of raised and wiggling hands around you, the teacher would call on you. But not today. Today, you're getting out of school early. Maybe you have to go to the dentist, or attend your sister's ballet thing. Whatever it is, any minute now, the pass runner is going to waltz into the classroom with your own personalized dismissal pass, and you're going to get the hell out of that classroom. At that moment, and only at that moment, do you realize how important the role of a pass runner is. Most people don't think about pass runners at all. They just assume that the early dismissal pass is going to magically show up and, for once, they can flee the chamber of madness, where everyone is just so goddamn enthusiastic about polynomials. But what if the pass runner is late? What if they don't show up at all? Failure to deliver your early dismissal pass will leave you sitting in the class that you hate, vulnerable to the public questioning and humiliation. How many more minutes before you're called on to factor a polynomial, or list the 49 causes of World War -5? What if your pass runner doesn't come before the teacher decides that public humiliation is the best way to address your lack of affinity for his subject? It gets worse from there. If the pass runner is late, the living hell your life has become doesn't end when you escape the school. Why didn't you come out on time? Your mom asks when you climb into the car. You need to start being more responsible, she'll say. We're going to be late. What the effing F does she think you were going to do? Just get up and leave class without the mandatory pink rectangle of freedom signed by the attendance office? Does she want you to sprint out of school like you just robbed a bank, with the school resource officer tearing along behind you with his taser? If your life was a war movie, your mother's idea of responsible behavior would be the scene where you're running in slow motion from the tree line to the landing zone, getting gunned down by the enemy just before you reach safety. Anyway, my point is that the pass runner is an important person in your life. I was like you once. I didn't think about pass running at all, until I dropped oceanography. Without a suitable replacement science course in the oceanography time slot, they assigned me to the attendance office. After dropping the class, my new schedule said Period 6, Attendance Office, Pass Runner. My high school education began in earnest the day I reported for duty as a pass runner. I was trained to run passes by the senior pass runners. Some of these elite students had been running passes since the first semester of junior year. They taught me how to run passes to the classrooms in the vocational wing. With their guidance, I learned how to use a pencil to prop the main building door open while I delivered the passes to the exterior modular classrooms, eliminating the need to run around the campus to re-enter the school through the office entrance. Soon I was running 4, 5, even 6 passes a period to the gymnasium, the science wing, and even the cafeteria. Some kids take half a year to learn how to run passes properly. Other kids never get the hang of it, but I learned the basic skills of pass running in only a few weeks. I had an affinity for it. Over the next few months, I mastered the intricacies of pass running. If they gave out colored belts in pass running, I would have worked my way up to a 5-dimensional black belt. I could accomplish pass running feats that other runners couldn't even dream of. I ran passes to the marching band during their on-field practice and to the drama club during a dress rehearsal. I delivered a pass to the correct O'Malley twin even though nobody could tell him apart from his sister. I even ran passes to other pass runners while they were running passes. I was that good. When you reach the highest level of proficiency in your profession, you tend to notice things that others miss. For example, every time I run a pass in Mr. Jackson's history class, he is talking about the Monroe Doctrine. First marking period, last marking period, freshmen, seniors, whatever. That's pretty much his entire curriculum. And I noticed that Mr. Finn always seems to be hanging around in the cafeteria when Fatina, the only young-ish and attractive-ish lunch lady, happens to be washing down the tables. And I know all the kids who skip class during 6th period and which bathrooms they hide in while doing it. I also noticed that nobody ever delivered a pass to room 277. Ever. Literally. I checked the log. To most people, the pass log is just a gargantuan 3-ring binder that gains a new sign-out sheet every week or two as we record and sign for the passes we delivered. There is a county policy about retaining early dismissal records, but I guess there's no policy about discarding them. The log has pass records that go all the way back to when the school opened in 1975. To me, the pass log is the story of my people. If you study the history of the school's early dismissal pass delivery, you can find untold tales of pass running heroics, tragedies, and comedy. For example, in June 1994, a pass runner delivered 12 passes in one period. That's the record, by the way. I came close to it when I ran 10 passes on the Wednesday before Thanksgiving, but nobody has topped the 1994 record. The echoes of the 9/11 attacks are in the log as well. On that day, the log records pass runners delivering early dismissal passes to over 150 students as their parents pulled them home after the towers collapsed. And never let it be said that pass runners aren't without a sense of humor. The log contains plenty of entries of passes delivered to Phil M. Buttocks, Richard Hertz, and the rest of the hilarious fake names. Yet, in the entirety of pass running history, there is not a single case of anyone delivering a pass to room 277. Every other room in the building has had a pass delivered to it at some time or another. Each of the regular classrooms have had hundreds of passes delivered to them. Passes have been delivered to the main office, the kitchen and the cafeteria, and even once in 1983 to the roof. But nobody has ever been dismissed from room 277. It's kinda weird, don't you think? As a pass runner, I considered the matter of room 277 fully within my jurisdiction. Sure, I could have referred the matter to the Student Government Association, but frankly, they don't have the resources or the expertise to deal with this kind of thing. Indeed, as I wasn't even sure what kind of thing this was, it would be irresponsible to create drama and intrigue where none was called for. I decided to investigate room 277 myself. My chance to conduct preliminary recon came soon enough. I had to deliver an early dismissal pass to room 273. After rescuing a stressed-looking sophomore from his chemistry class, I stepped into the vestibule for room 277. I never had a class in this room, but, from the outside, it appeared to be a normal classroom, like any of the others on the second floor. The wooden door, like all the rest in the school, had a narrow rectangular wire glass window that gave a view of a small wedge of the room. The light was on in the room. Class was in session. I peered through the window and saw a row of students sitting in the back row of seats. The window was too narrow for me to see what was closer to the front of the room, but the small region I could see looked normal enough. I was able to get a good look at the student closest to the door. He was a jock-looking kid, probably a senior. He had longish hair and was wearing a shirt with brown and orange stripes. He was focused on whatever was happening in the front of the room and didn't notice me looking in. I stared at him for a full minute, trying to figure out who he was. But I couldn't. I was sure that I never saw this kid before in my life. I spent the rest of that week asking around about room 277. I was just looking around for basic information. Have you ever had class there? Do you know anyone who had a class there? Have you ever been inside for any reason? As I expected, unfortunately, my investigative efforts shook loose more abuse than actual information. I lingered in the physics lab after delivering a pass to a senior in AP Physics to ask if anyone had ever been in room 277. "Hey, you're the one who's majoring in attendance studies," said one would-be physicist. "We've got better things to do than help you with your super hard attendance lab." The culinary students were even less helpful. "Whoa there, cornflake!" Brandon, my pass recipient, snarked at me when I asked about 277. "Why don't you let us Fruit Loops do the heavy mental lifting around here? Maybe you should concentrate on running those passes." It was the same just about everywhere else I asked around. The cheerleaders, the world history class, and even the kids in the small engine repair threw so much shade at me. By the end of the week, I was casting 3 shadows. In the rare cases that I got a serious answer from someone, it was always the same. Nobody had ever been to room 277, or even knew anyone who had. Whenever a pass run would take me into the 270 wing, I would duck into 277's vestibule and peek into the room. It was the same scene every time. Exactly the same scene. The same kids sat in the same seats, their eyes fixed on the front of the room. The jock kid, closest to the door, was even wearing the same clothes every day, corduroy pants and an orange and brown striped shirt. I don't know why I kept trying, but my persistence eventually paid off. I finally got some actual help from David Mibley. David is a prolific hanger-outer in the boys' rooms. He treats it like it's his job. He practically punches a time clock every time he starts a restroom hangout session. David's parents, who don't realize that their son has an affinity for hanging out in bathrooms and a lack of affinity for the more traditional lines of study, send him to private and very expensive SAT tutoring each week. It's because of David's private lessons that I'm so familiar with his restroom schedule. I have to deliver his hall pass each week so he can leave early for tutoring. Everyone zip it up! Girl coming in! That's my standard way of announcing pass delivery to the boys' room. You really don't want to wait until they come out to hand them their pass. It takes way too long. It's just me, Kitcher, David mumbled, and I'm all zipped up. Did I mention that my name is Sarah Kitcher? I should have mentioned that earlier. I asked David my usual set of questions about 277. I don't know. He paused. Sometimes David pauses for so long that most people think he's stopped talking, but I know to wait that extra 30 seconds to let him continue. Maybe you should ask the legacy. The legacy, yes, David, that is a fantastic idea. The legacy's real name was John Wagner. It was a widely held belief amongst the Westlands student body that the legacy reached his peak in high school. He was in the class of 1979, the first class to graduate from a newly opened Westlands. Not only that, but he was on the Westlands wrestling team when they won the 1979 state championship. People who investigate this sort of thing report that the legacy never reached the same heights of glory he had in 1979 when he could be seen, I assume, swaggering the halls of Westlands in his varsity wrestling jacket, proudly sporting his class ring with his cheerleader girlfriend on his arm. Peaking in high school is normally considered a bad thing. Who would want to live the entirety of their adult life knowing that they left the best version of themselves somewhere between homeroom and their locker? The legacy. That's who. The legacy found a loophole in the unwritten set of social rules that value adulthood accomplishments over childhood success. He simply never left Westlands. He graduated and immediately re-entered the school in the position of assistant wrestling coach. Since he never moved on to his second job, he technically has never left high school. If we apply the same social formula that says he peaked in high school, we have to admit that technically he's still at his peak. It's brilliant. That's also why we call him the legacy. Not only has he been at the Westlands since the pre-Cambian era, he never fails to remind the current student body of the relative greatness of those legendary beings of the class of 1979 who won the state wrestling championship. At some point or another, every kid in the school had been unfavorably compared to the members of the 1979 wrestling team. It's a rite of passage. My time came when I was taking the fitness test my freshman year. Come on, Kitcher! The legacy singled me out. If we were as sluggish as you in 79, we would have never won state. A high pass delivery load took up my entire sixth period the next day, but the day after was a slow one, and I had time to pay a visit to the physical education wing. I stopped at the gym lobby to gaze at the large trophy case dedicated to the Westlands' glory in the field of sports. They update the trophies every semester to make sure everyone knows about our latest victories. Yet, despite the frequent updates, the 1979 Wrestling Championship trophy somehow still managed to stay in the collection. It never moves from its permanent home right in the corner of the case. I pressed my face against a glass to study the photograph of the 1979 team that leaned against the base of the ancient trophy. I wanted to see what the legacy looked like in high school. If I held the image of him as a kid in my mind's eye, I thought it might make talking to him less of an ordeal. I scanned the row of smiling faces in the photo. I found the legacy, standing third from the left. The rest of his team members were smiling broadly, but the person formerly known to the student body as John Wagner stared into the camera with a grim expression of fear? He looked as if he knew that his moment of glory would soon be over, like he was peering down the steep, endless, downhill slope that would define the rest of his life. Something about the kid next to him caught my eye. Unlike the proto-legacy John Wagner, he had the smile of someone who had every expectation that the rest of his life would be full of moments like the one captured in the photo. But it wasn't his smile that grabbed my attention. There was something else. He was a jock-looking kid, with longish hair. probably a senior. I studied the names on the photo's caption and learned he was William Tavers. I collapsed to my knees when I realized why he looked so familiar. William Tavers, member of the 1979 Westlands wrestling team, was, without a doubt, the kid I could see through the narrow window into room 277. William Tavers, the kid currently taking classes in room 277, hadn't aged a single day from when the team picture was taken, almost 40 years ago. Infinite pain, destruction of your soul, factoring polynomials. You into that kind of stuff, Kitcher? My conversation with the legacy wasn't going as planned. In my defense, though, I planned the conversation prior to learning that his teammate on the 1979 wrestling team was living some kind of immortal life in room 277. After I mostly recovered from the shock of realizing that an unaged William Tavers was currently sitting in a classroom upstairs, I entered the gym and found the legacy presiding over a freshman gym class. They were running laps around the gym and he was yelling at them. "You're so slow because you're on your phones too much. We didn't even have phones in '79. He greeted me with disdain. "Kitcher, you here to rescue one of these slugs?" He gestured at the red-faced, winded freshman from getting physically fit. Why the heck is William Tavers still taking classes at Westlands? Billy. What? He goes by Billy. Billy Tavers. Got it? Oh. K. Why is Billy Tavers still a teenage student in this school? He looked around to see if anybody had overheard our conversation. The freshmen, currently running laps around the gym, were all looking at me, or rather the pad of hall passes I held in my hand, hoping that they were the one who would be dismissed. But none of them acted as if they heard us. "In here," the legacy ushered me into an equipment closet. "Keep running laps," he shouted to the freshmen as we ducked out of sight. Infinite pain, destruction of your soul, factoring polynomials. You into that kind of stuff, Kitcher? No. Then I strongly urge you to forget anything you think you know about the kids in room 277. Who are they? Besides Billy, I mean. The legacy sat down heavily in a stack of acrobatics mats. He looked down at his feet. When he looked back up at me, he had the same expression as the young John Wagner in the team photograph. Hopeless, frightened. They're all in there. The whole wrestling team. Except for me. Awkward silence for an awkwardly long time. It was, awkward. They say you're a pretty good pass runner, Kitcher, so you must know a thing or two about excellence, about success. Sure. I had no idea what he was talking about. When you reach the top levels of your sport, it consumes you. Your whole being is tied to your success. You do anything to win state championship. So, I quipped, what did you do? Make a deal with the devil to win state? No, he shouted. No, I did not make a deal with the devil. Another awkward silence. I made a deal with a demon named Yourescaringme. At this point in your reading, try to imagine a montage of scenes of the legacy passionately gesturing, yelling, crying, arguing with himself, and generally having an intense personal experience as he tried to explain something very important to me. As it turns out, I was the first person he ever told about the time he made a deal with a demon in return for the state wrestling championship. Everything he'd been keeping bottled up since 1979 came out in one long confession. There was stuff about a Ouija board, a contract signed in blood, payment in the form of the team's souls should the legacy back out of the deal, keeping the team locked away in escrow until the deal was complete, and something about factoring polynomials. In hindsight, I probably should have written some of it down. I knew he was finished dumping his confession on me when he got up, leaned out of the equipment closet doorway, and screamed at the freshman, "Keep running!" So, I began when he sat back down on the gymnastics mats. The entire 79 team is trapped in limbo in room 277 until you give the demon Yourescaringme your soul? Yes. The legacy who screamed at the freshman moments ago was replaced by a fearful John Wagner from the 1979 photograph. And Yourescaringme gets the team's souls if you leave Westland without giving it to him? Yes. The legacy wiped the tears away from the corners of his eyes. I've been working here for 40 years because I'm too afraid to give up my soul. And I can't sacrifice the team, Kitcher. I can't. They had nothing to do with the deal. He took a few choked breaths. The way I see it, Kitcher, I have to die at Westlands, and somehow have my body be buried on the grounds. Then Yog-Sothoth must release the team without taking my soul. By now he had officially switched from being choked up to full-on blubbering. I don't want to die at Westfields. I don't want to be buried here. What a crappy deal. Signing up to have the team held hostage until the legacy either forfeits his soul, leaves Westlands, at which point he effectively hands over the team's souls to the demon, or somehow manages to find a way to die and be interred into the high school. All for a stupid wrestling match. Fortunately, I had already figured out a way for everyone, except the demon, to walk away from this arrangement. I can fix that, I told him. I'll just deliver early dismissal passes to everyone in room 277. They'll be free, and you can finally go to college or whatever, and the demon doesn't have to get anyone's soul. Another awkward silence. They were getting more awkward the longer we talked. Kitcher, I'm embarrassed to admit, in the almost 40 years I've been at Westlands, I hadn't thought of that. Like I said, I have an affinity for pass running. Cool. Anyway, 6th period is almost over. I'll write up the passes and deliver them tomorrow. There was a burning smell in the attendance office when I got back from the gym. I sniffed around the room and found the source of the odor. An undelivered pass, burned black around the edges, lay on top of the dismissal logbook. It said, Date, Eternity. Name, Yog-Sothoth. Room, Teacher's Lounge. Reason, Contract Negotiation. If you've been out of high school for a while, then you might not understand why I found this note so problematic. First, the pass needed to be delivered to the Teacher's Lounge. No student ever goes in the Teacher's Lounge. Second, 6th period was almost over. By the time I got to the lounge, the bell would have rung and I'd be late for 7th. Oh, and the demon. That's probably bad too. I glanced at the clock to see how much time I had. 2 minutes and forever. The second hand on the clock was frozen. Time, according to the school's master clock, had stopped. The hallways between the attendance office and the teacher's lounge were completely empty and utterly silent. I paused in front of the door to the lounge. 70% of my fear was due to the fact that the demon Yog-Sothoth was behind the door. The remaining 30% of my fear was due to the fact that I was a student about to enter the forbidden teacher's lounge. I had never been in or even looked inside the teacher's lounge. It contained a couch, 4 comfortable-looking chairs, a coffee table with a few old issues of Time magazine and Sports Illustrated. A small kitchenette with a refrigerator and microwave occupied the back of the space. Mrs. Holmes and Mr. Jackson were stuck to the ceiling. Yog-Sothoth sat on the couch. Imagine what you'd have if you took a pile of the grossest roadkill you've ever seen, mixed it up with about 200 pounds of hamburger meat, and formed it into a roughly humanoid shape. Stick 6 or 7 goat eyes around on its head, make both the arms and legs end in bony bulges with a few dozen fingers and claws sticking out in odd directions, and give it a mouth that looks like an anus with fangs. That's Yog-Sothoth. He has a beautiful baritone voice though. Pass runner. He gestured to the comfy chair directly under Mrs. Holmes. Have a seat. I sat down and looked up at Mrs. Holmes. Her arms and legs were spread out as if she fell up onto the ceiling. Her face was frozen in horror. Yog-Sothoth said something, but I didn't really hear it because I was distracted by the sight of my sophomore history teacher squashed into the ceiling above me. Kitcher, the demon shouted and snapped a few of its fingers to get my attention. Yeah. I was talking about the laws of physics, Kitcher. You've studied physics, yes? You mean like F equals ma and stuff like that? Yes, those laws. He paused for a moment and looked at me with 4 of his 6 goat eyes. The laws of physics are bullshit. I knew it. I didn't get very good grades in physics. They're bullshit for me anyway. Demons aren't bound by physical laws. Cool. You think you'd have a better response? I doubt it. Yes, it's very cool. Stopping time, he gestured at the clock. Reversing gravity, he gestured at Mrs. Holmes and Mr. Jackson. No problem. But Kitcher, there's a catch. Us demons are bound by words, promises, deals, contracts. Once we've agreed to something, we cannot go back on our word, no matter how much we'd like to. Cool. That's why I need to discuss your plan to deliver early dismissal passes to my students in 277 tomorrow. The contract the young John Wagner signed basically put the souls of his teammates at risk for the state championship. I know, he's such a jerk. Oh, John's really not that bad of a guy. He just doesn't read very carefully. He thought the clause about the team being relegated to my classroom until he left school only applied until graduation. After he graduated and the team was still locked up, he realized that the deal was forever. He panicked and got a job in the phys ed department. And here we are. Well, I'm going to deliver early dismissal passes to the whole team tomorrow. Before you do, read this. A foot-thick binder of blood-soaked goatskin pages appeared in my lap. I opened the binder. Neat lines of blood ink calligraphy clearly stated, Flingelmath, Glorax Bujni, Gritham, Doth Reth Greth, Slognaxoth. This is the most metal thing I've ever seen. Well, it was. Let me translate for you, Kitcher. It says that anyone acting as an independently motivated hero, and that's what you'll be if you deliver dismissal passes to 277, must forfeit their soul if they fail to complete the pre-specified heroic task. Kitcher, if you deliver passes to my wrestling team, then I will assign you a heroic task to complete. If you fail to complete the task, I will consume your soul. That sounded bad. What would my task be? If you deliver early dismissal passes to room 277, then you will have to successfully deliver 20 early dismissal passes during period 6 tomorrow. If you fail to deliver even a single pass, then I will eat your soul. Yog Sothoth's challenge weighed heavily on me as I got in bed that night. Fortunately, I fell asleep right away and woke up fully rested. I didn't start puking from terror until after breakfast. Jesus, Kitcher, go home sick. Dawn, my bus stop buddy, didn't think much of my hurling into the bushes. I can't, Dawn. I'm an independently motivated hero. The heroic task Yog Sothoth's deal would compel me to attempt, should I rescue the kids in 277, seemed impossible. Nobody had ever delivered more than 12 passes in a single period. And that record was set back in 1994. To save my soul, I'd have to not just beat that ancient record, but smash it. Delivering 20 passes in a single class period seemed impossible. It wasn't my fault the 1979 wrestling team was trapped in room 277. The legacy created this whole situation, so why can't he just sort it out himself? Good question, I said to myself, and then I told myself the answer. It's been almost 40 years, and he hasn't done anything about it yet, so I think it's safe to say that he isn't going to. I thought briefly about referring the matter to the Student Government Association. I immediately realized that idea was foolish. They don't have the resources or skills to deal with such a difficult supernatural attendance problem. Mostly, I thought about just not doing anything at all. Why should I risk my future for a bunch of jocks who would have probably made fun of me if I attended Westlands in '79? The problem with that line of thinking is that I'm not sure what kind of future I really have to risk. I run passes. That's just what I do. The AP Physics kids made jokes about me majoring in attendance studies. Do you know what? There's no such thing as a degree in attendance studies. I checked the websites for a ton of colleges. I have an affinity for a skill that has no parallel or use in the adult world. The grim truth was that I had peaked in high school. No, it was worse than that. I peaked in my junior year in high school. Unless a scheduling miracle occurs, I won't even be an attendance assistant next year. Rescuing the kids in 277 could be my last chance to do something meaningful with my life. Sure, if I survived, I'd probably spend the rest of my life acting like the legacy, reminding everyone about my glory days as a pass runner. But I probably wouldn't survive, so that wasn't too much of a concern. All of this hardcore introspection occurred over the course of periods 1 through 4. By period 5, I still hadn't decided what to do. The clock was ticking. No convenient demon-induced time stoppage today, and I needed a plan for 6th period. I thought about Billy Tavers. That kid has been trapped in class since 1979. Nobody has ever needed a pass runner as badly as Billy and the rest of the kids in 277. I was a pass runner, one of the best there's ever been at Westlands. If I didn't rescue Billy, nobody would. The bell rang. I raced to the attendance office as fast as I could. I needed to act quickly before I chickened out, and to preserve as much of 6th period as possible for my heroic task. I slid into the attendance office, grabbed a pen and a stack of passes and sprinted to the gym. The 6th period bell rang as I was copying the names from the 1979 photograph onto the passes. I tore upstairs and arrived in the vestibule for 277, gasping for air. 6th period was already slipping away, and I hadn't even rescued the team. How was I going to get 20 passes delivered with only part of 6th period remaining? I could feel myself starting to chicken out. I knew in about 2 seconds, my brain would come up with a really great sounding reason to abort my mission. With no further hesitation, I opened the door to 277 and stepped inside. 12 kids' heads spun to look at the first visitor in the classroom in 4 decades. Yourescaringme was sitting at the teacher's desk at the front of the room. What was written on the blackboard behind him could fuel math anxiety nightmares for years. Your teacher today, and forever, Yourescaringme. Pop quiz. Find the factors of the following polynomials. The polynomial was so long, it covered the entire blackboard. I looked from the blackboard to the 12 unbelieving faces. These were the faces of kids who had been factoring polynomials for 40 years. Yeah, sorry to interrupt. That's just what I always say when I walk into a class that's in session. I wasn't really sorry today. I have dismissal passes for everyone. I read the names of the kids. With each name, a kid stood up, took the pass from me with shaking hands, and sprinted out the door. I read the name on the last pass. Billy Tavers. Billy Tavers stood, looked at me with watering eyes. Thank you, he said as he took his pass. Thank you so much. Billy followed the rest of his teammates out the door. Kitcher. Yourescaringme scolded. We've only been factoring polynomials for 40 years. Now that you've dismissed them, I'm concerned they'll never really master that skill. It's on the SATs, you know. Where are my passes to deliver? The school clock was ticking away. Time was no longer frozen in room 277. Yes, your heroic pass-running task. Let me write them out for you. Hang on a minute. The demon produced a stack of attendance passes from the desk. He fished around in the desk drawers looking for a pen. Hurry up! Yes, time is certainly slipping away from you. His misshapen clawed hand emerged holding an elaborate red fountain pen. He scratched the pen onto the top pass. It had no ink. Oh no! Sarcasm. I seem to be out of ink. May I borrow some of your blood? What? This pen works best with fresh blood. May I have some of yours? Fine. I rolled up my sleeve and held out my arm. Yourescaringme knows a thing or two about drawing blood. He expertly jabbed the top of his pen into my forearm and drew a few teaspoons of blood into his pen. He withdrew the pen from my arm. I didn't even get a little band-aid, and started painstakingly scrawling names onto the passes. He handed me each pass as he finished. The passes needed to be delivered to the most spread out points in the school. The science wing, the gym, upstairs, downstairs, the band room, even to the friggin' modulars. You have 38 minutes left, Kitcher, the demon said as he handed me the last pass. I haven't eaten a soul in decades, and I'm quite famished. See you soon. I sprinted out of the room, nearly collided with Billy Tavers, who was standing dumbfounded in the hallway. What do I do now? He asked me. Go to your 6th period class, I shouted to him as I ran as fast as possible to deliver my first pass. I had mentally optimized my delivery route as Yourescaringme handed me the passes. I decided to start on the 2nd floor, run down stairwell B, and deliver the passes to the science hallway. Then I'd blast through the doors by the student parking lot and deliver passes to the modulars. From there, back into the building to deliver a pass to the culinary classes. I'd work my way into the gym and finish up in the band room. I delivered my first 2 passes to 208 and 284 smoothly. Relatively smoothly. Instead of my polite knock, the apology for interrupting, and the respectful handover of the pass, I burst through the classroom door, practically climbed over half a dozen students to slam my pass onto the recipient's desk. Then I ripped out of the room without looking back. The delivery wasn't up to my usual standards, from a manners perspective, but I had to hurry. 18 passes to go. I leapt down stairwell B, nearly killing a freshman who was lumbering up the stairs under a full load of books. I slammed through the double doors, into the science hallway, and flung myself into the physics lab. I was in and out so quickly, not even the school's smartest and snarkiest students had the time for even a quick quip to cut me down. The delivery to 117 went smoothly, but my foot snagged on a backpack strap as I ran out of 138. I fell onto the floor and skid out of the room on my belly and face. I spastically disentangled myself from the backpack and managed to lose my shoe in the process. 15 passes to go. I rammed open the outer doors and burst into the sunlight. I sprinted up the ramp to the modulars, shielding my eyes from the sun. I delivered 3 passes, 1 to each of the modular classrooms, and ran back down the ramp. That's when I realized I made a fatal mistake. Literally fatal. The usual pass runner hack when delivering passes to the modulars is to use a pencil to keep the door to the main building open while delivering passes. Otherwise, the door will close and lock, and the only way to re-enter the school is via the main entrance, on the opposite side of the building. In my panic, I forgot to prop open the door. Now I had 12 passes to deliver before the bell rang, and I was locked outside of the friggin' school. I sprinted around the building, losing the sock on my shoeless foot when I cut across the grass towards the main entrance. Until now, my heart was pounding only from the physical exertion of high-speed pass running. But now the burst of cortisol and whatever other hormones are responsible for total panic had pushed my heart rate into the red zone. The front doors were also locked. I wasted valuable seconds throwing up and then jabbed the doorbell. Whoever was at the front desk was especially slow today. I stood outside the doors for a good 60 seconds before they buzzed me into the building. I looked back at the clock, 18 minutes left before the bell rang, and I had 12 passes left. I had to average 90 seconds per pass delivery. It still might be possible to deliver them all. Barely. I ran towards the culinary classroom, hoping that by pacing myself at 80% of maximum speed, my heart wouldn't explode before I was done. "Very impressive, Kitcher." Yog Sothoth's beautiful baritone voice was broadcast from the PA system. "I think I may have forgotten to mention the Supernatural Challenge Clause. Sorry about that. It states that I can choose to increase the difficulty of your heroic challenge through supernatural methods. I choose to do so." The fluorescent light bulbs in the hallways filled with blood, and the corridors took on a dim, reddish look that made me think of the inside of Yog Sothoth's mouth. The demon's voice on the PA was replaced by some seriously evil-sounding music. I ran into the culinary classroom to deliver the pass. Something looked different. Instead of wearing their whites, the culinary kids wore red uniforms, and instead of working individually over their stoves and counters, they were standing in a row, waiting for me. And instead of chopping onions or whatever, they brandished their cleavers fairly menacingly. "Hello, cornflake," Brandon, my pass recipient, sneered at me. I balled up his pass, threw it in his direction, and dove out of the room into the hallway. A dozen expertly thrown kitchen knives clattered into the lockers on the opposite side of the doorway. I was too scared to look behind me to see if Brandon and his crew of stabby, red-apron chefs was chasing me. I just ran as hard as I could to the gym. I knew my life was over and my soul was demon food as soon as I flung myself into the gym. The cheerleading squad was practicing. What's so bad about that? Today, instead of the blue and white Westland uniforms, the cheerleaders were wearing cute little red outfits with a Y on the front. They had traded in their pom-poms for swords. They each wielded a beautiful katana. Or maybe they were Tachi. It was hard to tell when I was running away from them in a blind, screaming panic. They shouted a battle cry, "Give me a Y! Y!" and sprinted after me. "Kitcher, in here, quick!" David Membley's voice floated out of the boys' room. I dove inside and ran into the handicap stall. I heard the cheerleaders' perky, murderous footsteps stop outside the bathroom door. "We can't go into the boys' room," one of them said. "Kitcher, what's going on out there?" I ignored David's question and looked at my watch. I was going to die in 10 minutes. Or less if I chose to leave the bathroom and get sliced up by Yog Sothoth's cheer squad. I started to think about what my last words would be. They couldn't be too complicated because David Milbley was going to have to remember them. The cheerleaders started screaming. For a moment, I thought they were charging the bathroom, but their screams, and their grunts, and then their moans, stayed on the other side of the bathroom door. Then the door opened, and the Legacy's voice floated in. "Kitcher, come on out. It's okay." The Legacy and the other 12 members of the 79 wrestling team stood over the cheerleaders. The swords were scattered around the gym lobby. Katanas, by the way. "I had gym, 6th period," Billy Tavers said. "And I found John. And I told him that you rescued us. And then—" "Never mind," the Legacy shouted. "We've got to run passes. Kitcher, show some hustle." I deposited 4 passes on 4 of the prone cheerleaders. 7 passes left. The wrestlers formed a wedge around me and sprinted away from the gym, towards the music wing. We rounded the corner and ran right into the culinary crew coming the other direction. The kids on the 1979 wrestling team were every bit the legendary athletes that the Legacy had built them up to be. Maybe not having mobile phones in the 70s had something to do with it. Or maybe the pent-up rage that comes from factoring polynomials for 40 years was responsible. Whatever it was, before you could say Greco-Roman, the culinary crew was decimated, and we were back to running full speed to the music wing. The rest was kind of a blur. A few kids with sousaphones got knocked over. I shoved a pass into the bell of a trombone and another into a trumpet. I slapped 5 passes onto the piano in the chorus room, and bang! The music stopped blasting from the PA, and the blood drained out of the fluorescent lights as mysteriously as it filled them up. I was out of passes. The bell rang, and the hallways filled up with kids going to their 7th period classes like nothing weird had happened. The Legacy and I stared at each other, neither of us having any idea what to say. Billy Tavers was looking at the chorus classroom smartboard like it was an alien artifact. The chorus teacher was looking at the wrestlers like they were aliens. The PA squawked. Yog Sothoth said, "Sarah Kitcher, please report to the attendance office." Yog Sothoth stood in the attendance office holding the goatskin binder in one hand and his blood pen in the other. "Sarah Kitcher, I'm sad to say that you completed the Independently Motivated Heroes Challenge. We have some paperwork to complete." He signed his name to a goatskin form on the back of the binder and turned the book to allow me to put my signature under his. "I'm not signing anything you give me," I said. There was no way I was going to get caught up in some tricky demon contract trap. I'll just fill out the dismissal information in the attendance logbook, and we'll call it a day. Very well. The goatskin binder vanished in a puff of flame and smoke. If you ever need some supernatural help with anything, Kitcher, just write my name in blood on a goatskin under a full moon while chanting, "Wait, is that how the Legacy summoned you?" "Yes." "Forget it." Yog Sothoth vanished in a larger puff of fire and smoke. I filled in the day's dismissal information in the logbook. 12 students dismissed from room 277. 20 more dismissed from all over the school. A new dismissal record. I really do have an affinity for this.